Well, good morning. That was cute, wasn't it? It's fun to see how people have been treated generously and how they've responded to generosity. I'm Becky, and I'm one of the pastors on staff, and I'm really excited to get to talk to you today. I really care about my subject that I'm talking about, and I feel like it's a really important subject for you to understand who God is and the life that He wants to give you. And so we're in this series called Selfless, and it's about denying ourselves and becoming more like Jesus. And today we're going to talk about extravagant generosity, because that's the clip was on generosity, kind of gave you a hint, huh? So have you ever been, somebody treated you to extravagant generosity? This is a theoretical question. You don't need to raise your hand. But just think about it. Did you ever experience extravagant generosity in your life? You know, God is a generous God, and He is so generous. He gave Jesus for us, which is the greatest gift of all, and that He generously provides all that we need. He generously gives us a life that's exciting and to the full, and He wants us to be like Him because He created us in His image. So He created us to be a generous people too. But in our culture, it's not so easy sometimes to be generous. And there's a verse that King Solomon said in the Bible that kind of reminds me of today. Proverbs 21:26 says, "All day long he," and he's referring to the lazy and selfish people, "craves and craves, but the righteous gives and does not hold back." And, you know, we live in a society that really encourages our cravings. It's always feeding us with what we need and how our life could be so much better if we had something special or if we got to do something special. And it doesn't encourage us to have enough. It encourages us to always want more. And we're always told we need more time. We need more entertainment. We need more food choices. There's always a new way of how you can be healthy or how you can fight cancer if you could just eat this food. We need more clothes. We need more toys. We need more adult toys. We need more electronic toys. And we need more rooms in our houses. Our houses are getting bigger and bigger. But as followers of Jesus, we can live a different way. And we can actually be givers and not takers. And that part of that verse that says gives and does not hold back, that kind of gets me. I need to be honest with you. Sometimes I think it's really hard to give. Sometimes it's so easy to be selfish. And it's so easy to have your lives focused on yourself. But to give without holding back means that you don't just give the minimum so you can say you're a giver. You don't just do what you feel like is expected of you. You give more than enough. And that's what not holding back is. And that's tough sometimes. For full disclosure, I was in the line at Taco Bell one day, and I saw a man who had a little sign out on the side of the street, and I thought, I think I should give to him. This was before I knew I was doing my talk, too, because once I knew I was doing my talk, I thought, I need to do 14 days of giving, and then I'll tell you how wonderful it was. That didn't happen either, though. But anyway, I didn't even know I was going to have to give this talk. And I'm sitting in the line at Taco Bell, and I'm thinking, this is a rare occasion I have cash. I could give something to that man. Okay, I have a few dollars and a $5 bill. Could I give him the few dollars? I could give him a couple bucks. That would be good. And then I'm feeling a little guilty. And then I'm thinking, or I could give him $5. What should I do? And I was debating all the way there, and finally I decided I needed to give him more instead of less. And so as I was pulling through the line, he was still there after I got my food. And I said, hey, what's your name? And he told me his name was Tommy. And he had a sign that he had brought out, and it said, I'm expecting a miracle. And so I gave him the money, and then I went away, and I decided, you know what? I need to pray for Tommy now that I know his name and pray that God would give him the miracle he's expecting. Now, I never saw Tommy again. I don't have any wonderful end to that story. But I know what it's like to want to hold back. And, part of giving is you don't ever know, was it a good choice to give that money? Did it really make a difference in that person's life? You don't know. But God doesn't say give if it's a good reason to give, and you will be given back. It just says give. And so our job is just give, and it's up to God, the consequences. So That was a little side note. A guy named Brad Formsma, who wrote a book on giving, said, generosity will certainly remove boring from your life. And that is true. I know that's true. I've lived it out. So today I'm going to talk about 3 mindsets of giving. And the first is the bag mindset. And the bag says, I have a certain limited amount of resources that I have in this bag, and I need to carefully guard over them because I need for them to be enough, and I'm afraid that it won't be enough. And so if I take out my bag and give to you, then I won't have enough for me. And the prophet Haggai in the Old Testament wrote to the people of Israel who were trying to make sure they had enough, and they were worrying about themselves and not obeying God. And he says, you eat, but you don't have enough. You drink, but you never have your fill. You have clothes, but no one is warm. And he who earns wages does so to put them into bags with holes. And that's what happens when you have that bag mindset of, I got to control my life. I need to control my money. I have a limited amount of resources, and I need to guard it carefully. It's never enough. There's always something that comes up in life. There's always somebody gets sick, or your car breaks down, or your sewer breaks. That's what happened to us recently in your yard. That's life. Things like that happen all the time. And so we can't take our money and control it and make sure that it's enough. That it just never works. 76% of all people today live from paycheck to paycheck. So anytime that any disaster arrives, then those holes are in your bag and you don't have enough. You know you have that bag mindset when you say words like, money doesn't grow on trees. I grew up hearing that word a lot. If I give, then I won't have enough for me. I can't afford to tithe. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. You know, I've never heard a rich person say that, but it seems like poor people say that all the time. They get all the breaks. It must be nice to whatever. Or if I could just win the lottery, then I could be a giver. That's being limited by what you have and having a fear of not enough. And that's the bag mindset. Another mindset is called the basket mindset. And in Deuteronomy 28, 2-5, Moses told the people, all these blessings will come upon you and accompany you if you obey the Lord your God. And then it lists a whole bunch of blessings, but the one I want to focus on today is your basket and your kneading trough will be blessed. They were in an agrarian society where they farmed and grew things. And so the basket is symbolic of your life. The basket was used to go collect the wheat. The basket was used to put the flour in when you ground the wheat. Bread was the source of life, and the basket meant you have all that you need for your life. And Jesus told his followers, give and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, it will be poured into your lap. When I think of that verse, I think of an experience I had going to IKEA a couple of weeks ago with Rick. You know those icy machines? You can see them in 7-Eleven. You get Slurpees, that great icy drink when you're really hot. Well, I saw a couple gals getting some ices at IKEA, and they filled their cups, and then they shook it down on the counter to make sure that the icy settled in. Have you ever done that? And then they filled it back up to the full, and then they put that lid, that domed lid on it, and then they put the icy little nozzle right into the lid and filled up the whole dome so it was up over the top, and then it was coming out a little bit because they wanted to get as much icy into that cup as they could. And that's what Jesus was saying when he says, give and it will be given to you. Not just enough so you can barely get by, but it'll be pressed down, shaken together, and running over. That when God gives to us, he gives to us in abundance. He gives us more than enough. So what you have in your bag and you keep is all you have. But what you give from your heart, God multiplies, or from your basket, God multiplies. And one of the ways he does that is the principle of the tithe. I know a lot of people get all nervous and uptight when we talk about tithing because they think, God, the church is just after your money. But you know what? I believe that God's principle of tithing really has nothing to do with money. It's all about our heart. Because when you tithe, which is giving the first to God, you give to him from the first of your income, and it's only according to what your income is. If you don't have any income, you don't give anything. Then he multiplies what's left to be more than enough for you. And giving that tithe, it takes trust. You've got to trust that God cares about you, that you have to have faith that God is able to provide for you. Because in our mindset, there's a limited amount of resources. Remember that bag? That you know what your paycheck is, and you know what your needs are, and mathematically, you can't afford to give off the top if you're one of those 76%, but actually everybody feels that way. And then it takes surrender, because you're surrendering your finances to God and saying, God, you determine my lifestyle. And then it's giving God control of your money. It's not an easy thing to do, and it takes faith. It makes me think of that movie, that Indiana Jones movie, where he had to, I don't know where he was, but he was in the middle of nowhere, and there was this big chasm in front of him, and he had to step out. Did anybody see that? And he had to step out in faith that there was going to be a path in front of him, and it looked like he was just going to step off into nothing and splat down in that chasm. But when he took that step of faith and put his foot out there on nothing, he landed on a bridge. And that's what it is by tithing. It's like, oh my goodness, there's no way that this could work. There's no way I can do this. And you take that step of faith, and God meets you at that point. And he's faithful and good to provide. And, I understand that there's credit card debt, and that sometimes we're enslaved to our debt, and you can't make those choices when you're in slavery, but you can ask God to free you from that slavery of debt, and you can tithe off of what you do have control over, and God will meet you there, and God will provide, and God wants you to have more than enough. And I was raised in a family that I'm so fortunate, it taught me how to tithe since I was a little kid. I got a 25-cent allowance, 3 pennies, you have to round up because you can't have 2.5 cents. 3 pennies I had to give at church. 10 cents I could give dues for this club I was in, and the other 12 cents was mine to spend however I wanted. And as a little kid, it was easy to give that 3 cents to church. It was no big deal. And then I started babysitting, and I'd make $10. It was easy to give that $1 to church. And then I started working, and it's just been something that was ingrained in me since a child, and I'm so grateful to my parents. And if you're a parent, it's really important that you teach this to your kid, because it's easy when you're a kid. And I know that there's a thing today that we're not supposed to give allowances to kids because they're supposed to do chores around the house because they're part of the family. But it's not about paying kids for doing chores. It's about giving kids money that they can learn how to spend money according to God's kingdom principles. And if they don't get a chance to learn as a little kid, it's hard to learn it as an adult, isn't it? It takes a lot more faith. But I know that God is faithful, and all my life God has provided for me. I have never done without. God has come through many times, over and over, my whole long life that I have lived. And I also watched my dad put God first in his life. I grew up, we went to church, and he loved God, and I could tell by the things he said and his behavior, the way he acted, that God was first in his life, and I knew that he tithed. And when he got to be 65, he worked for a corporation, and he'd only worked there 17 years. And when it was time for him to retire, the corporation's policy was that you had to work there 20 years to get your retirement pension. And 2 months before he retired, the headquarters of the corporation changed the policy that you only had to work there 17 years to get your pension. When my dad told me that, I was like, oh my goodness, I know that I can trust God. I know that God will always provide for me. That was a miracle that he did for you. And if he would do that for you, I know he would do that for me. And the truth is, he would do that for every one of you sitting here today. That he is no respecter of persons. That's who he is. He is a generous God, and he takes good care of his children. So that's the basket mentality, that I give out of my basket, and God multiplies it and gives back to me. Then the third kind of generosity I want to talk about today is a barn mindset. And in that agrarian society, they built barns to hold their crops when they harvest them in the harvest time, the fall or whenever it was. And so it was a storehouse. And our God is not limited by anything. You know, we say, I have a limited amount of time in my life. I only have 24 hours in a day. He's not limited by your limited amount of time. Or I have a limited amount of income, and this is all I get, and that's all there is. He's not limited by that at all. You know, he took care of the millions of Israelites wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. He fed them bread every morning that he provided. They didn't grow wheat and harvest it and grind it and make flour and have bread. He provided them with manna, which was bread out in the desert. He brought birds in so that they would have meat. He totally took it. Their shoes didn't wear out. He took care of them. He is not limited by our resources here on our earth. And he has more than enough. He has a barn of more than enough resources for everyone on the earth. And he wants us to have a barn mentality as we serve him too. Proverbs 3:9-10 says, honor the Lord with your wealth, then your barns will be filled to overflowing. Deuteronomy 28:8 says, the Lord will send a blessing on your barns and on everything you put your hand to. The Lord will bless you in the land he is giving you. If you put him first, he wants to give you more than enough, extravagant amounts, because he wants you to use it to accomplish his work in the world. That he is the king of heaven and of earth, and he is working on earth in his kingdom all the time. He's continually doing things, and he invites us to join in and partner with him in what he's doing. And he wants us to have some extra income so that we can use it to help be his hands and his feet to people who are in need. That we can be his vessel, that his love and his provision will flow through us to others. And so he has a barn full of resources, and when he knows that our hearts are open and we are willing to pass it on to others, he wants to flow through us in generosity to them. And you know, that there's no greater joy than being used by God and to partner with him. And I had to learn this as an adult. I wasn't taught this as a kid. I was taught to tithe, but I was not taught about extravagant generosity as a kid. But God took me on a journey about 15 years ago. It started when I was sitting in my office up here at church, and I got a postcard from Compassion International with the face of a child on it, and it was asking me if I wanted to sponsor a child. And at that time, in Africa and Uganda, the AIDS epidemic was so bad, and there were so many kids whose parents had died and who were starving, and they needed homes to live in, and they couldn't go to school, and they were just destitute. And when I looked at that postcard, I had this little thought in my mind that I think was a God thought. You say you care about kids. If you care about kids, you would sponsor one of these kids. And I thought, that's right. Yeah, I do care about kids. I guess I should. And so I sent the postcard back, and they sent me some information about this little girl in Uganda named Doreen. And so I signed up to sponsor her. And once I got that information, I started hearing about the plight of kids around the world, and my eyes were just open to the need. There's so many needs that I didn't know about because I just had never taken my eyes off my situation to look at those situations. And so I set aside like $32 a month, and we just started sponsoring this little girl, Doreen. And that action started opening up other opportunities that God put in front of me to do things. Like I got some money from a situation where I helped write some chapters in a book, and they paid me for it. And I thought, wow, what if I didn't spend this money on myself? What if I cash this check and keep this money in my purse, and I just give it away to anything that's not for me, just other people, like look for needs and kind of meet them. And so I hadn't done much of that, and I wasn't very good at it, but I cashed that check, and I just decided whatever came across my path, if I felt like I was inclined, I would give to it as long as it wasn't for me. And eventually, I gave away all the money. It took me a while because I wasn't even very good at giving away money. And so it was kind of a neat experience, and I didn't know, did I really help anybody? I don't know. I don't know. I tried to do anonymous stuff, so I didn't even know if people appreciated it. But I just tried to be obedient and do it because I felt like God was giving me an opportunity to be generous. And then a couple months later, we got this letter in the mail from some friends of ours that lived on the East Coast, and they sent us a check because they wanted us to go on a vacation. And I thought, this is such a coincidence. I wonder if this happened because I gave that money away. Do you think this is things that God does? I don't know. It's very interesting. I don't know. So then I started looking for other ways. Like I'd get some unexpected income. Like I got a raise at work, and I thought, I'm not going to use my raise. I'm going to give my raise to someone else that needs it more than I do. And then just different opportunities like that, money that come my way, I just try to be generous. And then God really spoke to us, and Rick and I felt like we were supposed to really help his mom and her friend Eileen. And some of you know our story, I shared it a year ago, but we felt like for one, I felt like I have a lot and they don't have enough. And I really need to give to them. So we paid off their debt, and we felt like we needed to buy them a house to live in. And I was really worried right before we bought the house. I thought, oh my goodness, what happens if we don't have this money? What happens if we can't afford to make the payments? What happens if we get them in this house and then they can't stay in this house? And I was all worried, and I thought, I don't need to worry about it. God's in control. And so we went ahead and did it. And we started just serving them. We started hanging out with them. We started helping them. And I noticed that my relationship started changing. I'd never had a real close relationship with my mother-in-law, and I started feeling a lot of love for her, and I thought, this is kind of cool. And then I started feeling a lot of love back from her, and then her friend was kind of a mean, crabby person, and she was changing. She was becoming this lovely person that I actually liked hanging around, and I really grew to love her, and I started enjoying our meals at Perkins, where I'd never normally choose to ever eat at Perkins. And I saw God was transforming my heart. God was transforming them right before my eyes. God was transforming Rick's relationship with his mom. I couldn't believe the things that God was doing. It wasn't always easy to serve them, but sometimes I had that little, I'm not sure I want to spend my time that way, but then God would just bless me when I do it. And I'll just stand still. But I saw a miracle happen. I was changed. Rick was changed. My mother-in-law, her friend was changed. What do I do? Do I take another? I don't know what I'm doing. Do I turn it off? Okay. Thank you very much. So God was working. And do you know what? After, for about 6 years, we got to serve them. God gave back to us financially all that money we had given to them. I don't know how he did it or how it happened, but God is good. And I got to benefit from the blessings of being his channel of blessing into their lives, that he wanted to take care of Betty and Eileen, and he used us, and I'm so privileged that he got to use us. And anyway, I have lots of stories of God coming through and doing that, and the joy that comes with being used by him. But one of the most recent experiences I got that was really super fun, and a lot of you got to participate in, is I love Convoy of Hope. And you've heard of Convoy of Hope because we take a One Day to Feed the World offering. And I love that Convoy of Hope cares about women who are destitute. And it comes alongside them and trains them, befriends them, gives them the skills to start a business. They give them the money to seed the business, and then they give them the support to help it flourish just by walking with them on the journey. And so one of the things Rick and I have started doing since we have given so much to God, he started giving back to us, as we have little bank accounts that we set aside a little money each month to give away. And so I've tried to give a lot of my money to Convoy of Hope's Women's Empowerment Program. And every year I try to sponsor one woman. And I've done that for several years now. And we were at a Convoy of Hope meeting this summer, and they take pledges of what you want to do for the next year. And I thought, I'd like to sponsor a woman again. I really love that I can be able to do that. And I felt God say, well, that's about $1,000, $1,200. I felt like God said, why don't you give $10,000 this year. And I thought, $10,000? There's no way I could save that kind of money in my little savings account. And I don't know how I could do that. That would be like a faith pledge. And God, you would have to provide the money. But I thought, but God, if you provide the money, I'm willing to do it. But there's no way I could do that. But if you provide it, I'll give it. And so I told Rick what I'd done, and he was like, you did what? He wasn't excited at all. And I kept saying, it's a faith pledge, Rick. If God has to provide it, if he doesn't provide it, I can't give it. And so anyway, it made him very nervous. And so I felt like once I had pledged that I needed to give the first 10% because I had it in my little savings account. So I gave the first 10%. And I said, God, you're going to have to provide the rest of it. I don't know how I can do that, but here's the first 10%. And then I went and talked to Natalie and some of the other women about our women's Christmas event, our Christmas brunch, because a year ago Christmas, we had raised enough money to sponsor one woman for Convoy of Hope's Women's Empowerment Program. And so I talked to him about, hey, what if we could do that again and maybe we could raise some money? And I was so grateful for Felicia. She said, let's raise $5,000 this year. Let's set a goal. And I was thinking, okay, well, I know we get $10 a person and I can't imagine how that'll happen, but I didn't want to discourage her. So I was like, sure, let's do that. That's great. I didn't know how it happened, but okay, let's do that. And then women started getting on board and we set up a opportunity for women to sell their crafts, and they just paid for a table, and we had women that bought tables. And then we had Phyllis, and I don't know who else was on her team, but Phyllis who said, I'm going to go out and I'm going to solicit gifts that people can bid on. We'll have a silent auction. And so I could never do that. So I thought that was pretty cool that she did that. And then women actually did bid on the gifts, and that was very cool too. And we had 200 people that came to the event, and all these people were selling their wares, and I was so excited. And we had a gal from Convoy who shared, and then we took an offering, and when we got to count up the money, and people, you brought food so that we didn't have to buy food. You set tables so we didn't have to pay for things to be on the table, decorations or for plates and stuff. And when I counted up the money at the end, we had raised $12,000. And I was so excited. And I was so excited that I got to go on that adventure with you guys, that it wasn't just me and God on my own, but we did it together. And we will never probably meet those 12 women who can be part of Convoy's program now. But I do know that we're part of their story forever, that we're part of their lives being changed, that they're on a new trajectory now, that they're going to have an opportunity to provide for their families. And we did it together because God is a generous God. And I'm so excited about that, and it's so fun. So, how do we start out a journey in extravagant giving? How do you do that? Well, if you don't tithe, your first step is to start tithing, to start giving to God off the top of your income. And if you're in a place where you can't do it with what you have. You can only give from what you have. What you have that you can control, give from that. And God will bless it and give you the ability to give more. And then if you do that, ask God to give you some unexpected income, just to provide for you maybe in ways that you don't think you could, and then decide not to spend it on yourself, to give and don't hold back to others. Listen to those little nudges from the Holy Spirit in your head that says, this is a need. You know, there's so many needs, but God only is calling you to fulfill certain needs for him. He has lots of people he's working through. So this is the need that you need to do and respond. And then whatever you can, set aside something so that you have something to give to others. And for you, those of you who are parents, it's so important that we teach our kids about generosity, and I want you to watch this video. Pretty cool, huh? I want our kids to have their own stories of giving. And as a parent or even grandparents, we can come alongside our kids and teach them about generosity. First, we model it. And then we invite them into the journey with us, and we encourage them when they have their ideas and they feel led to do something. Encourage them and walk that journey with them like that mom did. And when you see them doing it on their own, coming up with ideas, then you know that your modeling is really working. We are hardwired by God to be givers because we are created in His image, and He is a giving God. And if that generosity piece is not nurtured inside of us, it'll die. And so you want to nurture that piece in your kid. Now, in Vineyard Kids, we've been learning about generosity in kids ministry. And so this is a great time to have a conversation with your kids if they're part of Vineyard Kids. And Compassion International has written a resource to help parents. It's a 4-week devotional, and it's called 30 Days of Heart Work. And it's available through the YouVersion Bible app that you can get online for free. If you don't have a YouVersion Bible app, you really need it because it's cool. And then you go to the plans and you search Heart Work or Compassion, and you can download it. It has some reading to do every day, and then it has a once-a-week devotional to do with your kids and some activities, and it talks about having a project for them to do. And in Vineyard Kids, in February, for our Fun Day, Sunday, or whatever Amanda calls it, that's coming up, they're going to be talking more about generosity and talking about working for a cause. And there's a church in Chile, in Puerto Montt, Chile, who is building an orphanage. And they want a playground for their orphanage too, and we want to come alongside and support that. And so that would be great if your kids could be part of providing a playground for some kids in Chile who are orphans. John Bunyan said, "You have not lived until you've done something for someone who could never repay you." And that's the truth. So I'd like you to stand, and I'd like to pray for you.